This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today we're talking with Steve Koerner, Vice President of Market Development at BP Pulse. Steve, it is great to see you again.
Good to see you as well. Last time we talked was right after passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. A lot has changed and a lot hasn't, but I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to dig into that as well. Beforehand, though, also last time we talked, I feel like you had a different title and company and all that. It was Amply. Now it's BP Pulse. Just bring me up to speed on where you're at and what the company's doing.
Absolutely. When we talked last, I was the Vice President of Policy for Amply Power. Now I'm the Vice President of Market Development for BP Pulse Fleet. And beside that, almost nothing has changed.
Okay. Good.
In terms of my title, went from policy to market development just to kind of acknowledge the broader role that me and my team play in terms of creating an attractive market for not just our business model, but also for our customers. So that encompasses policy, but all kinds of NGO work and engagement with utilities that goes beyond just pure policy work. And then as for our title, we even then were a subsidiary of BP, the diversified energy major. We did go through a rebrand. We're excited to be more formally part of the BP family, and specifically their global EV charging brand, which is BP Pulse. So we are technically, my group is BP Pulse Fleet, which is a good fit for Fleet Equipment, Unscripted. And for those of your listeners who are not familiar with us, BP Pulse Fleet offers comprehensive EV charging and energy management services for commercial fleets. So that's everything from light-duty vehicles to Class 8 vehicles and above, and everything in between. So school buses, delivery vans, transit buses, coaches, you name it, we work with it. And our business is simplifying fleet electrification. We have a range of products designed to make fleet charging simple and allow our customers to focus on their business instead of their vehicles. Our core offering is our Omega Charge Management System, which minimizes fueling costs for our customers and makes sure that their EVs are ready to go whenever they're needed for their duty cycle. But we have a wide variety of customer options, including our turnkey charging as a service model, where we handle every aspect of vehicle charging, from buying and installing the chargers to O&M, management of day-to-day vehicle uptime. You name it, we do it. We can do everything from design your system, do your procurement, all the way again through the management of day-to-day. A new addition since I was on last, we've added an in-house grant writing team that can help our customers access all the state and federal grant money that's out there, and there is a lot of it. So if anyone in your audience is looking to convert their fleets to electric, or even if they have an EV fleet but they want to lower their charging costs and improve their vehicle availability, they should give us a call.
Yeah, for sure. And they have their work cut out for them in infrastructure, I think, because there is a lot going on. We have a lot to talk about. I'm hearing a lot of things in the market. So let's just kick it off here. When we last spoke, the Inflation Reduction Act had just passed. We were looking at what changes that would bring to the market. And you were looking at this could be a revolutionary thing as it comes to the market. So since then, we talked about last fall, late August, early September there. What have been the big revelations on the EV movement in terms of infrastructure that you've seen and putting the act to work?
Well, there's a lot of customer education that goes into it. These are still new policies, and so we're trying to communicate that to customers and potential customers so they know how to access these tax credits. In terms of their implementation, it's really still very early in the process. The only real implementation news is that IRS released its methodology for calculating what the comparable vehicle is when it comes to the commercial clean vehicle credit. And as you may recall, that's a credit that is capped at $7,500 for vehicles up to 1,400 pounds, $40,000 for everything else. And that's a 30% tax credit. So it can be quite valuable. But one caveat there is, it's that or the lesser of the incremental costs between a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle. So IRS has at least come out with some guidance there. They've relied on an analysis provided by the Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies Office. And they found, at least in the light duty sector, there was no EV priced inside of the $7,500 cap for light duty. I suspect that they will find the same for medium and heavy. But it means at least we now know what that method is. But that was like, in terms of people accessing the credit, they're beginning to. Again, it is a lot of customer education. Right. I think this is just filtering into the bloodstream. There's, of course, the EV infrastructure credit, which is near and dear to my heart. I worked on that a lot when I was doing a lot more Capitol Hill work. There, we're in a little bit of a holding pattern. We're waiting for IRS to provide guidance. There are a few questions that remain that are pretty important. So one is, what is actually a single item? It's based on 30% tax credit for each item. It used to be based on per location. Now it's on a per item basis. So we got to figure out, well, what's an item? Is it a charging port? Is it a charging cabinet? This will matter for fleet applications, because for some of the larger applications, it will change what kind of equipment you buy based on the answer to that. Another open question is, what expenses qualify for the tax credit? We do know that expenses that are intrinsic to the working of the charger do qualify, but there are a lot of edge cases, and we're just waiting for the IRS to determine what exactly qualifies. And then the big one is the geographic requirements. Right. As you may remember, to qualify for the infrastructure credit, your equipment needs to be in a federally designated low-income census tract or in a non-urban census tract, which is something I think that most of your listeners probably don't know where they are. Right. But specifically, we are still waiting on the Census Bureau to release its demographic data from the 2020 census. And that will determine if you are, in fact, in a low-income census tract and qualify for the tax credit. And in the meantime, everybody's using the 2015 census estimate, which has been used for other tax credits. And then when it comes to that urban-rural question, we're waiting on the IRS to determine what that means. The Census Bureau doesn't have urban and rural census tract designations, so it's really up to interpretation. And what they decide there is going to have a big impact on what locations qualify. So that's kind of the news. So it's the rollout, it's the education, and then waiting for IRS to tell us exactly what the terms are.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point there, because even when we talked last time about the disadvantaged areas or even the rural areas, I mean, top of mind, even in some of the fleet locations, they think, maybe I qualify for that, just given where I'm based and where my depots are, right? They're sometimes out of the way and can be in some of those regional applications. But to your point, making sure it's actually designated that legally by the government, I mean, that's a completely different thing of just where I define rural, right? Okay, so with all that coming from the IRA, we're also hearing that, infrastructure is really the big challenge now. Trucks have come into the market. We've seen larger Class 7, Class 8 trucks. I was at Work Truck Show a couple weeks ago, and I think every press announcement had something to do with an electric work truck in that world, coming from the Class 1, even all the way up to Class 6. But those trucking companies are having a hard time with infrastructure. The equipment's coming in, they're getting an idea of what they can do with the duty cycle. What are you seeing out there on the front lines, and how could they push through, even in different states, right? All the different states are handling this a little bit differently. What's your advice for trucking companies trying to get infrastructure put in their different states, and how they're able to work with all the parties involved?
Well, when it comes to EVs, the charging has to come first. You have to have the infrastructure, because if you don't have the infrastructure, your vehicle's not going to work. So first and foremost, I would say anybody who's converting to electric, start early. Right. Talk to a company like BP Pulse Fleet and get your order in with your utility as soon as possible, to give them as much time as possible to go through their energization process. And then you get into the world of permitting and zoning, which can be a real challenge. Mm-hmm. When it comes to permitting, it's really a local issue, and everything varies by locality and by utility. Utilities have their own energization process, so it's really hit and miss in terms of how you get going based on jurisdictions. But there's a few things that states can do to improve matters at the local level. They can create a model permitting code. and encourage their localities to at least consult it. I mean, this is new for towns and municipalities as well. So getting your state to put forward best practices and a model code can be a real help in terms of getting your infrastructure permitted more quickly.
Right.
Massachusetts has a modeling ordinance, a modeling ordinance, excuse me, for EV permitting. New Jersey has a law on the books that requires municipalities to establish standards and requirements in line with its model EV permitting code. California has a law that requires local jurisdictions to create a streamlined process for permitting charging installations. And they have another law that includes deadlines for approving projects. Unfortunately, neither of those laws have enforcement provisions, so compliance is very spotty. But at least it gives you an idea of the kinds of laws that your customers could push for. And frankly, in my job, I do push for at the state level. And there's another thing states can do, which is encourage utilities to streamline those energization processes, which can be, years long, especially when you're dealing with utility upgrades. So there's a lot you can do there as well. In California, for example, the governor's Office of Business and Economic Development came out with several recommendations that we like. Having utilities provide clear and upfront guidance to developers regarding their process, like it's not always transparent.
Right.
Getting utilities to create designated design and project management teams just for charging projects, because this is going to become a very big market, and having a dedicated team with expertise will help move things along. You can encourage utilities to use online portals, use technology to improve transparency and just make it easier for developers to move through the energization process. You can have local governing authorities share information with utilities about the charging stations that are in the permitting process, and that would allow them to get a head start on their energization efforts if they're not aware. And then one innovation that we at BP Pulse Fleet are pushing for in several states is to give utilities the ability to invest in grid upgrades in anticipation of new EV load. Usually they're waiting for a service request, but when you've got bus depots, logistics hubs, those are going to electrify, and it takes years to put all of the required infrastructure in place. And allowing utilities to invest in anticipation of these projects, and that's a policy called anticipatory build, could dramatically speed up energization timelines. All that really is needed there is good modeling, improved communication between utilities and their customers, and then permission from state regulators to make the investments, because ultimately those investments are rolled into the rate base, and it does go into customer rates, but it will have a dramatic impact on the speed with which we can energize, especially big projects.
Right. No, for sure. And, as you're talking there and talking about what fleets could do with their states, right, too, going back to it, having a partner that's going to be able to help me do this. Because when you look at it as if I'm a fleet and I'm looking at, I'm going to get the energy from my utility, right? I've got the equipment over here. I've got my charging infrastructure provider there too. I mean, even as you mentioned, the grid upgrades and the work you're doing there, I mean, BP has an interest even just in terms of the supply line, right? That's your supply chain of energy. You need to get it from your source and you need to get it to your end customer, me being the fleet, working with the people to pull that through and streamlining that supply line. Because we are seeing a lot of, we're just hearing a lot of anecdotal cases where maybe you have a state's on board, but the utility's slower to come. The utilities are doing a good job, but the state isn't quite there. So fleets are getting caught in the middle here and can kind of stagnate some of those efforts. You mentioned California. You also mentioned New Jersey there and a couple others, which is interesting. Where else are you seeing hotbeds of EV activity across the country that maybe we might not think about? Clearly, California, I mean, it's its own country to some degree with some of the things they got going on there. But anywhere else in the country that's really standing out to you?
Before I go to other states, it's really worth acknowledging California's tremendous investment in EV charging. They anticipate putting $3 billion into zero-emission charging infrastructure over the next 5 years, and half of that is set aside for medium and heavy-duty vehicles.
Right.
I got to say, no other state is coming anywhere close to that. And just for context sake, the National EV Infrastructure Program created by Congress in 2021 is only $2 billion larger than California's $3 billion one-state investment. So it's really extraordinary what the state has done. It really deserves a lot of applause from the community.
Mm-hmm.
But almost every state is engaged in some EV charging investment over the last few years. Most of that money, however, has come from the VW Dieselgate penalties. There was $2.7 billion in money that went to the states to mitigate emissions from the cheating scandal. Not all of that went into EV charging, but a significant portion did. But that money is really running out. So while there was a flurry of investment, the next big set of investments will come from the National EV Infrastructure Program, the NEVI program.
Mm-hmm.
But even beyond that, there are some states that are gearing up spending in addition, just from their own budgets. Washington State just approved a $39 million public charging program. Oregon has a $15 million grant program for medium and heavy duty EVs, EV infrastructure, excuse me.
Right.
Those awards are due out any day.
Right.
In Nevada, you've got NV Energy, which got regulatory approval for a charging program that includes rebates for commercial fleet infrastructure up to $5,000 per port, up to 10 ports. That's a really rich program, a really attractive program. Massachusetts has approval for a $400 million utility investment in make-readies. Those are all the things you need except the charger in order to begin to install your charging. So it's make-readies and rebates, and that includes a pilot program aimed at public fleets. The big one outside of California is New York. They have a $600 million make-ready program already. The staff of the Public Service Commission just proposed increasing that budget to $1.1 billion. That's real money. And that also includes a $30 million pilot just for medium and heavy duty vehicles. I know that there are a lot of other programs out there. This is what comes to mind.
Yep.
And, regarding all the state money, again, I want to remind everybody that BP Pulse Fleet has an in-house grant writing team that can help fleet customers access this money. Our grants lead, Tiffany Hammond, would like nothing more, I promise you, nothing more than to meet with you and provide a funding assessment. So, there's all that. There's the state money that's going to come from NEVI, but that's all for public charging. It's $5 billion over 5 years. There's an announcement that was just on Tuesday about the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program, grant program from the US DOT. $700 million in that tranche. But again, it's for public charging.
Right.
So I will tell you that many states are aware that there's not a lot out there for medium and heavy duty in particular. Most of this is geared towards highway charging for light duty vehicles. So there is an option down the line with the National EV Infrastructure Program with NEVI to do some depot charging. That's going to take a couple of years. They technically have to fill out all of their highway corridors before they have discretion on how to spend that money. That's something that we're going to be working on to try and get it's got to be multiple commercial entities, but charging depots for commercial motor vehicles.
Right.
That could happen in the next couple or 3 years. But most of it, again, it's all that federal money for public charging aimed primarily at light duty, but then all those smaller programs as well, which we'd be delighted to help your listeners access.
Right. And I mean, it opens up a lot of other opportunities depending on how you want to roll out your charging infrastructure strategy. I mean, we've thrown around the big numbers of investment. You've mentioned the grant writing, which, I mean, all of this is very complicated, right? And what will be my use case? We immediately go to, yes, I want to charge my equipment. And that's first and foremost. I need to make sure chargers are available and I need to get my equipment charged to meet my duty cycles. But there are opportunities there. I mean, you look at something of what like Daimler Trucks has done out in Portland, where they created their own public charging island, right? So they went a little larger. They're charging all their electric trucks that they're using to run around town and test. But it's also an open public. Anyone can drive up and use it. And right. So there are some of those opportunities, even at your location. Do you open up your charger for a point of sale for charging, right? I mean, even anecdotally, we even at our office just put in a charger here. Now it's level 2 and it's out in the back, so we didn't have to dig anything up. And it's more for the automotive and the folks that are driving in here. But those are the conversations that are happening here. Is it a business opportunity? What revenue opportunities might exist for that, and if it doesn't interfere with my duty cycle, right? And that means me talking to someone like you as on the service provider to understand, okay, where can I squeeze the most money out of all these grants and incentives, and then what is the kind of long-term plan for what I'm spending and what I'm generating in terms of potential revenue there.
Well, an ecosystem is being built up over the next 4 or 5 years that it's going to make it a lot easier for everybody, both individuals and commercial entities, to go electric. And it's a great time to be exploring whether it's time to convert a fleet to electric. You've got the Section 45W credit that's going to lower your vehicle costs by up to 30%. You've got the revised 30C infrastructure credit that could save you up to 30% on the cost of your chargers. And then, if you work with a company like BP Pulse Fleet, we're going to minimize your O&M costs, your energy costs. We can help you with every step in the process. And it is complicated.
Yeah.
It's something that, if you don't do this every day, you're going to miss nuances and opportunities to maximize the value that's out there and actually just put the best system in place. It's an exciting time to be working on fleet electrification. And, we at BP Pulse Fleet would love the opportunity to help all those fleet managers out there to figure out if going electric makes economic sense for their company. So I just would encourage them to at least reach out to us, get a free assessment, and see if it pencils for them.
Right. Yep, money talks. And if you can see it in black and white and it makes sense, it makes it a lot easier to move forward. Steve, it is great talking to you. Always great catching up. I always learn a ton. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, Jason. Great talking to you.